Welcome to today's episode of Bear Talk. Today I will be hosting a session in English because I have a very special guest. The guest today is Michael Lassen. Michael is an expert in mindset, coaching-wise, as well as in marketing, so that's a really rare combination. He has achieved major breakthroughs for a lot of his clients using his system called the speed of implementation, which basically helps people achieve big breakthroughs in a short amount of time. Today we will be covering a lot of ground. There's really some interesting topics we'll be discussing, ranging from the value of testing, the secret formula for selling, even for people who hate selling, the fastest way to achieve major breakthroughs, and how Michael, by random chance, ended up saving a life. There's a lot of powerful teachings in this episode, and we really had a blast recording it, so I hope you enjoy as well.
It's time to kick ass and chew bubble gum.
Yes, we would like to have a meet you in a town.
Hej og velkommen til Bear Talk. Mit navn er Bjørn Vestergaard Barfod, og jeg er din vært.
So Michael, welcome to the Bear Talk podcast. It's really a pleasure to have you here.
Well, it's great to be on.
I have looked very much forward to this, and I have a few questions. Hopefully we can manage to have a really good podcast and discussion about your specialty, which is speed of implementation and generally the mindset and marketing principles.
Cool.
Yeah. One of the first questions I would like to ask you, Michael, is basically, I hear you talk a lot about the growth zone. What is that, and how do you manage to get yourself there consistently?
Well, I started talking about the growth zone like years ago from hearing all about the comfort zone and in a lot of different contexts, anywhere from dating to business, selling, etc., etc. And everybody talked about how sort of dangerous the comfort zone is. And then I went, wait a minute, because one of the first things that we hear about in any type of success literature or courses or what have you is that what you focus on, you get more of. So I sort of felt like the little boy in the story with the emperor's new clothes. I was like, this doesn't make sense to have all the focus on the comfort zone, because then what do we get more of? And then I went, okay, so what is it that's outside the comfort zone? And then I thought, growth zone seemed like a cool word. And the big point being is that then we have something we can associate positive emotions into, and we can have as a goal of spending time there instead. It kind of makes sense that way. And it also makes it easier to, quote unquote, get outside your comfort zone, because you know where you're going and you have the intention while you're going there to create growth. And then also the other thing I think is a huge important point is to not see it as a pressure that, I have to get outside my comfort zone. I have to get outside my comfort zone, because then what do you focus on? But that it's, you see it for what it is. And also you're not afraid of the comfort zone, but you use that deliberately too, like for recharging, because I don't think you can, be in your growth zone that much, because then you're just going to burn out eventually. So it's getting the best out of both zones, so to speak, and enjoy it for what it is. So when you in fact are in your comfort zone and recharging, then do that instead of feeling, bad conscience that you're not spending more time on your growth zone. There's a lot of talk about hustle, hustle this, hustle that. And I think that what that lends to is a lot of people take it as too much of a pressure. And and I guess you could tie it into the whole mindfulness wave, is that, when you're in your comfort zone, then be there, enjoy it. And when you're in your growth zone, know why you're there and get as much out of it as possible. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a really interesting perspective, I think. And actually also touch a bit on something that's really interesting for me as well. I have always wondered why. I mean, people like Gary Vaynerchuk and such are really talking about the hustle all the time. And it seems like, there is a balancing wave going on, looking more of a whole life, so to speak. So both, as you say, you are in the comfort zone, but also in the growth zone. So how do you manage to balance being in the comfort zone with being in the growth zone?
Well, that's the thing, and we're all different that way, and it also depends on how you, like, for example, take care of your health, basically. And, for some, they need a certain type of exercise regimen to function optimally. For others, don't need as much, etc., etc. So it's all about figuring out what works for you. And what I believe is really crucial is that it's really powerful to have rituals, obviously. I would say especially morning rituals. And I'm also a big believer of testing. Is testing new things. Because if you never test, then, well, maybe you're missing out on some huge opportunities. And even, for example, like speaking of morning rituals or any type of rituals, like using a week, maybe 2 for testing something, if you manage to discover something that can lead to 1, 2, or maybe 5 or 10% improvement, well, if we look at the long game, that's a really, really good investment of your time. Even if you get like a small percentage that way. And so I'm a really big, I'm a really big fan of the sort of concept behind testing, which is what I've, basically heard about from the marketing world, is that you need to spend a certain percentage of your, like, advertising budget or your time even to test something new. We have the split test, A/B, etc. And I've used that a lot in other contexts like mindset. Because what it also does is that if you're testing something, you're removing it a little bit emotionally. So it's not as much about you. It's actually more about the test. So it can be a pretty cool way not to take things too seriously or take yourself too seriously, of having that mindset of testing. Hey, let's see what happens. So you're not sort of overly invested in any given results. It's more like, hey, let's see what happens.
Yeah, that's a really, really interesting point as well, that most people get too attached to making changes rather than actually trying to test things to see if they make sense in their context. What have you been testing lately?
Well, first of all, I just want to speak to that. What it also does is that it sort of prevents neediness, in the sense that you can be too attached to a specific outcome. And neediness is one of the worst, basically worst emotions you can have, because most people will pick it up, and all the best people will pick it up. And it's, in terms of selling, it's one of the worst things ever. If you need a sale to go through, you have to be almost like 5 to 10 times as good a salesman or woman that you would otherwise, because it's just such a bad frame to be in. Same thing with, I used to, like almost 10 years ago, I worked on a workshop with for men who wanted to have more success with women and with dating. And what I started out with is that when I was asked if I wanted to do it, is I asked all my female friends and said, what's the number one thing you hate in a man? And they pretty much, all of them said, well, if he's needy, it's game over. Nothing is going to happen there. And then I went, okay, so what would be the opposite of neediness? Well, that would be knowing what you want and not being willing to compromise on it. So I said, well, how about we start there? And that holds true across context, is that when you have that intention, knowing what you want and why you want it, and not being willing to compromise, and at the same time be flexible enough to do the testing. That's really powerful. Yeah. And your question, what have I tested recently? Well, one of the things that has been a passion and fascination, if you will, of me of the last couple of years has been the whole thing about selling, and how many people have extreme resistance to it, both in terms of being sold to. I mean, there's the old saying that people love to buy, but they hate being sold to. And especially in the area that I tend to work with a lot is sort of the coaching, expert industry, teachers, etc. And especially the more we get closer to the spiritual side, it's like selling is for a lot of people almost associated with sin, almost sometimes. And, to the extent where I have seen someone who was extremely talented, one of the best people in the world. I was a huge admirer. And after he had done a day presentation, he had brought some DVDs and some books, and I could almost, I swear I could literally feel his pain when I handed him, I think it was 30 or 50 bucks, which for me was like a steal. I mean, I would seriously have paid easily 1,000. So my point being is that what I tested was doing something I called a 12-day momentum challenge within a Facebook group, where there was a different assignment each day. And the test was to see what would happen if I just were going into give mode. Do absolutely no selling and see what would happen. And the funny thing was that I sold quite a lot, even though I didn't. So that was and it was intentional on my part, is that it was a goal, but I wasn't doing any selling, quote unquote. So that was really interesting to see that, and it was a very deliberate test, because I realized if this worked, it could be a huge breakthrough for people in that industry specifically who really dislike selling. I mean, it's you've probably seen it too, that people who are really talented and legitimately can change other people's lives, it's just something stops them, and there can be many different reasons. And I thought, well, instead of getting them to work on those reasons, why not test something where it just wasn't necessary? Which I think is an interesting mindset to look at. If you have a problem or challenge, a situation that instead of quote unquote fixing it, which I'm all about, I love to fix stuff. I'm pretty good at it. Is how can you set up your life or business so it just doesn't become relevant anymore? So that was also my sort of train of thought, is that, well, how about setting something up where it just doesn't matter if they don't like to sell? So that's a little long answer, perhaps, but it was a very deliberate test, and it taken like 45 days to test it fully. But then, I believe I came up with a breakthrough, so it's definitely worth it. I would have been fine if it just turned out that everybody said, well, thanks, that was awesome, see you later. Which, of course, a lot of did.
It's really, really interesting, and actually a very good point, the whole point you raised about selling, because actually a funny story from my back catalog as well was one of the guys I really looked up to when I was going in was Keith Cunningham. We're both familiar with the guy from Rich Dad Poor Dad, and we used to have a seminar with him where he was a keynote speaker, and I overheard him at one point, actually after one of his very, very good keynotes. I mean, he knows so much about business that it literally just blows my mind away, right? But then I just overheard him like, well, I'm not that much into selling. And he'd been in the industry for 15, 20 years, right?
Yeah.
And it's really something that I really can relate, that a lot of people have a hard time selling. So it's really, really interesting that you came up with this other way to kind of just flip things around, right?
Yeah.
What have been your main takeaways from this test you did with regards to selling and providing value? I guess you can probably kind of combine it to it, I would say.
Well, I think one of the big reasons that people buy these days is that they need to. It's been used quite a lot lately, the thing about know, liking, and trust, and maybe to some that seems like a cliche, but I believe it's more true than ever, and it's more important than ever, because for the people who are in it to, fake it, basically, it's become so easy. I mean, you can buy a ClickFunnels account. I mean, you can even just get one for free, a trial for 14 days, and you can literally set up a site within a day tops that looks like, top notch. You can have a site that looks as good as Brent Bouchard. I mean, he even gives away his template. So you might even have to spend more than 4 hours. So my point being is that, and especially there is all the race these days with fake news and alternative facts, etc. So what I see as a huge thing is people are getting more and more confused about what's real and what's not. So having that know, like, and trust factor is so important. And so that's what I really believed happened during these challenges, because I was on every day doing a Facebook Live within the group, answering questions, adding to the daily assignments, etc. So what I did different there is that my goal was not to get people's emails, for example. You didn't have to sign up. My goal, sort of internally, was to get people to show up for 2 Facebook Lives. Because then I knew that they would either resonate with me and get to know, like, and trust me, or they wouldn't. And I'm fine with both. You know, I'd rather that they find out that, oh, that's not a match. You know, rather figure that out in 2 evenings than not. Because then, and 2 things, the other thing I noticed for was who was doing the assignments. And who showed up. And actually, which you can see within Facebook, who's showing up and who's actually watching them. So I got to see, okay, who's taking action and who knows, like, and trust me. And that information is golden because that means that they're my people. It means that, you know, I can do different things with those people, offer them different things, you know, be more available, etc., etc. So that was one of the other cool things about this test or model, if you will.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, I would say. And actually also...
Because, sorry to interrupt. Yeah. Because usually if with typical email list building, the know, like, and trust factor is something that can take months, literally. Especially if you're one of the people who just don't get it in terms of that you actually have to give first. I mean, we both know of people and companies who are just, you know, pitch, and they never get there. but even just doing it through emails can sometimes take a long time. And I'm like, well, if we could make shortcut, how would I? And well, this seemed like a cool thing to test out and work really well. And I think that also goes to the thing about selling is that when you really get to a point where you enjoy being you for who you are, and you're not afraid what people think of you, it becomes so much easier because it becomes about, well, where is the resonance and how can we figure out that resonance as soon as possible? Which was actually by going back to the old program I used to do in sort of the dating world. It was called Congruent Man. Is that what that's what I told them. I said, well, one of the reasons why we need to figure out what you want, why you want it, and who you want it with is that we need to figure out how can you quickly find out if there's a match there, if there's resonance. Because why would you waste like 2 hours talking to someone if you could figure that out in 5 minutes? And, you know, at the time, that was sort of a disruption within the industry because usually, you know, all the let's just call them what they were, sociopaths was teaching, you know, how to stay in conversations as long as possible and all kinds of bullshit. And said, well, not really. Let's figure out if there's a match, if there's resonance. And if not, that's cool. 7.4 billion people in the earth. You only need 1,000 to make a really good living and make a good difference. So, let's go fish.
That's a really, really good point, actually. And touched upon the next question I was going to ask you, basically, because I heard you mention the 1,000 true fans theory before. Can you brief for our listeners touch upon this and how this influences business?
Well, it's kind of simple. Is that a lot of people noticed that if you sort of know what you're doing and you're not a dick or anything to your people or to your fans, if you have 1,000 people who you know knows, like, and trust you, and you sort of have an okay idea of how to do marketing, that's all it takes to make a good 6-figure income in dollars. And so my point is that, well, let's get the neediness out of the way, and let's, you know, focus on us being us, you being you, me being me, and figure out that resonance as soon as possible, and allow ourselves not to try to sell to anybody or, you know, try to make everyone become a fan, etc. And really see it as I remember the first time I was doing a live stream where someone had a negative comments. I literally, and it was recorded, my face lit up and I'm like, wait a minute, I think I just got my first hater. That's fucking time. That's about time. And you know, my mentor for years, Dan Kennedy, he has this saying that if you don't piss people off by noon, you're just not pushing hard enough. I think he's too radical, to be honest. Yeah, I think he should have said 1 or 2 o'clock, perhaps. But there's something to it, is that, not being afraid of showing who you are and what you have, and get it out there. And the cool thing is, it's going to be the right people who resonates with it.
Yeah.
And oh my God, one of the things that I wouldn't say I'm regretting. On the other hand, if I could go back and change something, if I could take like 3 people out of my life, like actually mostly business wise, I would have saved a lot of time and money. So, in hindsight, if I could have avoided that real easy, by just not being willing to compromise and me being me instead of trying to make someone happy.
That's really powerful, Michael. And actually, I would say that it's really an important point to get yourself out there. And going to get yourself out there also requires that you enter your growth zone, basically, right?
For sure.
Which touches upon the next question I'm going to ask you.
Because, by the way, that's where you find out about yourself, and your self-awareness can grow where you meet yourself. That's within the growth zone. I mean, I can be me sitting out in the garden, like I mentioned yesterday, the first day where there was sun and warmth, and have a glass of champagne and really enjoying life. But that's comfort zone. And that's definitely not the growth zone. So yeah, and also again embracing both. So not being afraid of showing that side either, and not being afraid of going into the unknown and quote unquote fail spectacularly.
And with regards to the growth zone, basically this next question is very important for me, I guess, since I'm a dad of a newborn. How do you manage?
So your comfort zone basically got eliminated.
Exactly.
Almost 90% off the table.
I am in my growth zone 24/7, right?
And to the listeners who aren't parents yet, you probably don't get this, but you might someday. Just kidding.
But I mean, he will grow up, and one day I want him to enter his growth zone as well and be comfortable doing it. Do you have any strategies for children or for young adults to continually push themselves outside the comfort zone?
Well, I mean, that's something that me and my wife are very much big on, is encouraging effort more than results, and encouraging when they are exactly in their growth zone, and appreciating the effort more than the actual end result. And that's not something I invented or anything, but I really see that working extremely well. And it's very, very rewarding to see that with your kids. How, I mean, it's part of what we do, it's not everything. But that part I really, really believe in, and I see it, and who knows, maybe that's something that should be used in leadership as well. Never thought about that until now.
Yeah, really interesting to hear this as well. Michael, we talked a little bit about speaker implementation. Tell me, because I think it's really radical thing you come up with, and it's really, really great. Tell me about the time that you discovered it, and how it came up, and also like what were your internal dialogue when you just discovered that you found something that was truly unique? Well,
I mean, I heard about it for the first time, I think 10 years ago, 2007, when Eben Pagan was having his seminar called Altitude. And so it was the first thing he talked about, that it was the number one thing successful people had in common. The funny thing was that the internet marketer Frank Kern was in the audience. And so he immediately went up to his room and started working out his first online major success product, which was cool. And which I made the joke that I did a keynote this summer at a seminar, and I was supposed to be on the first day, and it got moved to the last day, and I realized, oh, that's why, because he wouldn't have half the room leave me telling that story. No, but that's where I heard about it, and it just resonated, because I went, okay, if like Tony Robbins and many others says, success leaves clues, and if that's something they have in common, which when I thought about it, yeah, that's true. And when I look back to my history, I could pinpoint that, yeah, there was times where if I hadn't done that, I mean, who knows if I would have been where I am. So, for example, the actual start of all this was me being completely in my comfort zone, sleeping one afternoon and turning on the TV when I woke up and flipping the channels, and I saw Tony Robbins for the first time, and I thought, who the fuck is that? I need to see what that is. And then he talked about phobias, and I had a huge phobia back then. And then he said that he talked about it in his book, and I went, book? And I literally, within 5 minutes, was on my bike and going into the city center, like a 5-mile ride or something. Bought the book, went back, started reading it, got to the part. It was actually the wrong part. I found out it wasn't the best exercise, but I got it to work. And that's when I realized, holy shit, you can actually, do stuff that's not supposed to be possible within a few minutes. And I went, well, I'm into that. So yeah, I realized that it was really, really important. And I also realized that no one was teaching how to do it. It's like, take action quickly. Oh, okay, cool. That would be like my dad saying, hey, son, you want a girlfriend? Well, go to a club and get laid. Yeah. I mean, that might be a little crude example. But the point being that there was no one teaching it. And so I decided I wanted to figure out, well, what's going on? How can we reverse engineer having speed of implementation as your sort of number one strategy? And again, as not something that requires like willpower and chanting and incantations or what have you every day in order to get into a state where you can do it, but where it feels natural, where it's on more of a habitual level. And so yeah, it took some time, but now I'm really happy and proud with the results that is showing up more and more.
Yeah, that's really great, Michael. And what do you see? Like, what is the biggest changes that the people you are working with speed on implementation they need to change in order to actually be able to implement the stuff pretty quickly?
Well, it can be different because you can have 10 different people with the quote unquote same problem or same challenge, but it can really be for 10 different reasons. For some, it's been that they've had experiences where they took action fast and they fell fast too. And so that was sort of a protective mechanism from the unconscious mind. For others, it can be more of a habitual thing, that procrastination is their go-to strategy. For others, it can be, well, maybe they have perfectionism and they care way too much about what others are thinking, etc., etc. So the reason why behind can be very different. What I'm interested in and fascinated in is what can we actually do. So, for example, one of the things that struck me is that I asked myself the question, well, if there were some people who just by default use speed of implementation, what could that be? And then the face of Joe Polish, the marketer, popped up, and I went, well, I know he's everywhere, but it doesn't make sense in my mind here. But then I remembered that he had just talked about that he had a passion project around addicts. And I went, oh, that's it. That's what addicts do, is that they are thinking about the next high. They just see a gigantic picture of it and they just do it. They go for it with no regards to the long-term consequences or even short-term consequences of like do burglary or what have you in order to get that next high. They just fucking do it. So that was one of the things that I noticed is that actually making a big picture of it and then make it emotional. That fuck it, which it's much easier to demonstrate. So if I can plug my website, people can go and see the video where I demonstrate it. So the site is thespeedofimplementation.com, and there's a video there where you can see it.
There'll be links in this.
Okay, yeah. So you can see me demonstrate there with people. It's a really cool exercise to do yourself as well.
And so you see, I mean, you have helped a lot of people doing big breakthroughs in their life, and speed of implementation is among one of the things that you can help people accomplishing. But I mean, what are the biggest changes you see people need to make in their life in order to achieve their dreams, basically?
Well, the interesting thing is that when we grow up, we only have two fears. It's of falling and of suddenly loud noises. So anything else is something that we learned. And that means, so whatever fear we have, whatever thing that holds us back is something that we learned. And it's like, so, well, how do we learn things? We do it from experience. And so what happened when I started to study neuro-linguistic programming, hypnosis, and all kinds of good stuff is that it would work quite a lot and would be really effective. And sometimes it just wouldn't. And then I went deeper in the sense that looking at, well, what could be the experiences that had created that? And then I started to look for, well, how can we extract the potential learnings from that? So we have, again, back to the thing about focusing on. So we have something positive to focus on instead of the negative of shit happened and my life sucked after that. And so I sort of developed a method of how to extract those life lessons, if you will. And I mean, you can also basically just ask yourself the question, well, if I could learn something from this experience, what could it be? And that alone will be an improvement for sure. And then later after I developed it, what I heard from, I think it was both Brian Tracy and Tony Robbins and another place, is that what most millionaires have in common is that they've gone broke. I think it's 90 or 93% of all millionaires have gone broke at one point. And the difference between the ones who made it and went broke and then made it again, and the ones who stayed broke, is that the ones who made it again, they were able to take learnings from the failed experiment or the failed projects and apply them in the new thing. And I went, cool. Maybe someone should come up with a system of how to do that, and maybe that someone should be me. So yeah, that's definitely the thing. What I've seen, like, literally create miracles within an hour is that when people get to a deep point where they realize what they can learn from a negative experience, and at the same time release the emotional attachment to it, and then have this thing to look forward to and see how they can actually apply it by making a decision, a commitment to these learnings. And so they actually feel excited that this, and what's really funny is that it's almost scary how often that those things are, in people's own words, the exact thing that really is needed in order to get to where they want to go. So that has been a major breakthrough. And the speaking about testing and going into your growth zone, even though this worked, great for years, I continue to ask, well, if I could make it work even better, how would I? So I started asking at the end of a session like that, okay, so you've just experienced this change in 30 to 45 minutes. So having gone from something that has been holding you back for years into something that you now feel will empower you, when you realize that's possible in 30 to 45 minutes, what do you think potentially can stop you from achieving anything you want? And 100% of the times, people have said, well, nothing, I guess. And then I go, well, you said it. So yeah, back to your question is that definitely, learning from your mistakes and applying that is such a huge thing. Because we've all seen it, that people who tend to make the same mistake over and over until they learn whatever they're supposed to learn. And especially women with running into the same type of men. That's where it becomes very obvious, unfortunately. So yeah.
Really, really interesting. This whole mindset change. As you said, that people, one of the keys to kind of make these big changes is that they unlock the emotional attachment to a certain event.
And I think the reason why it works so well, it happens simultaneously. That is both left and right brain at the same time. So there's, it's not like one half can like hold the other thing back. It's almost like if, we sit in this room, if we have a person in here, we would like to get out of the room. If I push the person can lean back and resist. Or if you try to drag the person out, he or she could do the same thing. But if we do it at the same time, we're moving the point of leverage, so it becomes impossible for that person to resist, and out the door he goes. So that's how I see it, and I'm not a brain scientist, but that's the best explanation I've come up with of how it can work so well.
Do you have any good exercise tips with regards to how one would be able to detach themselves from the emotional scars of something that has been holding them back for a long time?
I mean, that's a complex question, because sure, there's different drills that will work, different for different people. I'd say the number one thing actually is to get that learning. That's what I've seen. It's almost like, well, sometimes also previously I've helped people release the actual emotion, but then when it's come back, I went, well, what if there's a point to it? What if that's a good thing? And then, it shows up every time that once you really get that key learning and commit to it, then it seems like, okay, then it's so much easier to let it go. Also because then there's something you can focus on instead. And it's like quitting smoking. That can be really hard for a lot of people if that's all they do. If they don't replace it either with a different habit, or even better, they go for what's the secondary gain of smoking, and find a much better way of doing that, which, by the way, like a lot, is something to do with stress related. So it's not just enough to start eating carrots instead. It's find a much better way of de-stressing, or building up your energy even. So that, I mean, it's not been a profession of mine, but I have helped a lot of smokers throughout the years, and that's made a big difference, is looking at what was it that they really got out of it, and then finding a better way of satisfying that. And then it worked really easy. So I think it's the same way there. There's a lot of different really good exercises to let go of emotions. There's tapping, there's NLP, kinesiology, what have you. They all work a lot of the times. And if you add this element in of what could you learn, or even ask the question, if there's something I need to learn from this, what would that be? That can be a major part of making it work.
That's really great, Michael. I wish that we had actually had a camera, because I can just see when you were discussing this whole topic that your eyes light up, right? And you're obviously really, really, really generous person. I think as Steiner Didlersen described you, but also you're very caring about other people and helping other people get rid of their emotional scars, but also making them achieve their dreams. Where does this fascination of helping people come from?
That's a good question. I really think that a lot of it had to do with initially what happened back then with my own phobias, that I realized, holy shit, this is incredible what's possible. And so I started testing it with people. And I think, I can't remember, it was the first time I tested with someone else, with someone I knew fairly well, who had to go into the military and he had to jump into water head first from 3 meters, and he just couldn't. And so we worked on that, and then I like to test my work if it actually made a difference. So we had agreed to go out and test it straight away. And so he went up there and just jumped in, and I went, this is just fucking cool. So I think it's still that childlike excitement of what's really possible. And probably throughout the years, it's been the thing of realizing that by giving first, you really figure out who is worth, spending your time on. Because those are the people who are gonna, 1, appreciate it, 2, take action on it, 3, ask, hey, can I give something back? I haven't been as good at following that as I should have. So I have wasted gigantic amounts of time giving to people who just didn't fit those criteria, hoping for the best. And I have to go back and listen to see if I can notice any sign of resentment in that. I don't feel like that anymore, honestly. So I think it's actually the best way of figuring out who are the best people to have in your life is use that as a test of give. And, it's practical as well. It's like, well, how are you gonna get a garden to become beautiful? You can plant a lot of seeds. Cool. Start watering them. See which one grows up, and ignore the ones that doesn't, and stop watering those. And it's really as simple as that. But I think this is actually really bad marketing for myself saying this, but I really enjoy it, both in terms of working on marketing and business. It for me, it really is that energy of being 5-6 year old and having a puzzle. And we're actually sitting in my house with lots of puzzles for 5-year-old kids.
Basically puzzles all around, right?
Yeah, so I've used this metaphor before, so it's not because I'm easily influenced that way. but it's that childlike excitement which I also suggest or invite to or encourages people to work with something where it gives them that excitement, because that excitement is really difficult to fake. I don't think you can fake it till you make it. With that, if you can, maybe you should be a Hollywood actor instead. You probably make more money if you're that good. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that totally makes sense, I would say, and also touches upon something I find interesting that you mentioned that at some point you have given a lot to people that simply, I would not say did not deserve it, but you didn't feel that you get the...
Oh, I'd say that.
I was going to get you to say the wrong words, right? But people who did... I find a theme with a lot of people I talk to that sometimes they have that someone in their life that they might not totally resonate or they feel like they don't they give too much or get too little back. A lot of relationships can be that, like friendships or romantic relationships and such. And how do you get to the point where you actually figure out, like, wow, this is not working?
I think a really good strategy to have, which is probably not the easiest thing to do, is that and actually when I thought about this for the first time, I took that from the business world in terms of having an exit strategy or like an exit criteria, is that what needs to happen for me to say, okay, this is it, that now this stops, or whatever it is, or maybe that is a confrontation. Who knows? That has to be, context specific, with, who it is, et cetera, et cetera. But having that sort of, criteria or exit strategy of saying, okay, this is how far I'm willing to go, or this needs to happen. Because if you don't have that, then it can be very tricky. It can become like emotional quicksand, is that you just get more and more dragged into it, and all of a sudden it's either too late, or you have invested so much that it becomes easier and easier to just, have hope win. At the end of the day, hope versus reason is, if I just give some more, blah, 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 blah. So I really believe in the earlier you can set that, exit point strategy or that turning point or criteria, the better, because it's so easy to get dragged into it. I've been there. I'm guilty as hell for sure. So I've learned the hard way, and that's one of the things that also motivates me, is to help people to learn it, at least the softer way. Because and certainly that's also for selfish reasons, because that feels good. It feels like the investment I did into those relationships where, in hindsight, I gave too much. Well, if that means that I'm more motivated and more committed to helping others learn from that, etc., that just feels good. And at the end of the day, and maybe even at the end of your life, just reading like emails and messages from people about what happened. Like, for example, I did one of these live lessons sessions like a year and a half ago in a group called Coffee with Dan, where there was this thing where you could give out some of what you did. And so I gave a session to a guy who, him and his girlfriend had just decided they wanted to have an abortion. She was 2 months pregnant, I think. And so, because he found courage through that, he talked with her, and he sort of almost projected that to her, so she got it as well, and they decided to have that kid. And in getting a picture from when that kid was named or christened, baptized, and see that his middle name is Michael. Fuck! You can't compare that to anything. I mean, I'd easily forego of $1 million for having an experience like that. Incredible.
Yeah, that's really life changing. Must be really tremendous.
And just to be honest, as much as I'm all about you being you, I had to sort of censor myself not to get all teary-eyed just thinking about it.
Yeah.
Just sitting there, Sunday morning, and that picture pops up. I was like, wow. Yeah. Then it's all worth it, and it all makes sense.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? When you help people, you are going to get the massive changes eventually, because you stack on top of that. So when you make even though it's not a big change earlier in the life, it can build up to a massive change later on, right?
Mm. And also another thing is that, and of course this is a big thing, naturally, but also realizing that small things can make a big difference. Like for example, I had a really cool experience the other week where I had gotten some seriously bad news, and something was bothering me in actually a situation like we just talked about. And so one of my clients just wrote a message, and she just added at the end, the world needs you. I mean, just a couple of words, but even that with me being all ego filled with all the things I've come up with and what I can do, etc. Those words from her, which took 5 seconds to write, made a big difference that day. So never discount what small things can do. Whether it's professionally or not.
Really strong point, Michael. And I mean, obviously, you mentioned a whole lot of different areas and people who have influenced you already. But you have helped a lot of people. But who have been the most influential in your own life in getting the motivation and skills to help other people?
There's me. I've never had that sort of one mentor-ish type of thing, and I've never wanted to. Like for example, I started studying with Richard Bandler, who's one of the co-founders of NLP, and of course I was heavily inspired by Tony Robbins, and I felt straight away that I didn't want to become too attached to one thing, in the sense that that I would sort of represent that. I've never advertised myself as an NLPer or a hypnotist or what have you. I've always been more of a collector, so it's more like bits and pieces from here. And certainly I've had mentors, like I've had John Carlson for a number of years and many others. So it's and again, sometimes it's the small things. For example, at one of the masterminds with John Carlson, he said like a small thing, like a small question. He said, okay, so Michael, I get what you're doing, and so have you thought about what level are you aiming after? Are you aiming after like Tony Robbins level, where you have to be in Barcelona like a year from now on that date, and you're responsible for maybe several hundred people's lives, employees, etc., or do you want to have the level below, etc. And I never thought about it like that. And it's like, oh, well, yeah, maybe I should sort of figure that out, so I'm not just aiming, charging ahead. So, it's probably not the answer you were looking for, but for me at least, I've had this thing that I wanted to learn from the best, and I wanted to learn from a lot of different people, because I'm more of a collector that way. That's how my mind works.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and I think and all people can relate to getting nuggets of knowledge from different people and applying them to their own life. Michael, with regards to, I've just seen your bookshelf; it's huge. So, with regards to books, which book have you gifted most to other people?
That's probably been either Think and Grow Rich or How to Stop Worry and Start Making a Living. I don't recall actually. It's probably Think and Grow Rich, yeah, because I've bought a lot of those to hand out to clients. Yeah, I mean, it's a classic, obviously, and it's the number one book that most people have said has inspired them to become millionaires. So, I mean, just for that reason, also historically, even though that some of it's actually funny. It's a funny example that one of the exercises in the book, I've literally met no one who's done it. And it's a really good exercise. And it's also one that with the technology we have available now, like mindset-wise, can improve on it, significantly. But I've actually heard of one guy who is using it quite profoundly. So yeah, I really both recommend reading that and there's so many layers to it. The other thing is that you can also read it as almost like a sales letter for the philosophy and for Napoleon Hill as a teacher, which is an interesting way of reading that on sort of a meta level. And also just the story behind, talk about speed of implementation, is that the whole myth around that story, whether it's actually true or not, is that he was interviewing Andrew Carnegie, who was the most successful businessman ever, adjusted for inflation. And I'm sure someone would disagree, but no, let's not go there. Sorry about that. That he offered him the assignment of going around and interviewing 500 people, of the most successful people in the US at the time, and he wouldn't get paid. It would probably take, I think it was 8 to 10 years, and now he had 1 minute to decide. I mean, and some people claim that story is not true. I mean, whether or not it is, I don't think is as important as how important it is that there was that story. Because if that story hadn't been there, I'm not sure the book would have been as successful. So maybe that was a little bit on a tangent, but
yeah, definitely very interesting. And I also really enjoy Think and Grow Rich as one of the true classics of literature in that sense. Michael, you mentioned a short bit ago that you had a very good question from John Carlton that changed the way of thinking. I find that you are really, really one of the person that I have met that are most fascinated with questions, and are really, really, I would always say you are always trying to ask the best question you are capable of doing in a given situation. What's the best question that you ask yourself on a frequent basis?
Well, the structure is quite easy. If I knew X, Y, Z, how would I? Or if I knew what to do here, if there was a solution, what could it be? If there's one thing I'm missing here, what could it be? Basically things like that, because that question opens up for possibilities instead of, closing down, and it presupposes that there is a solution. Like also just thinking about it as a challenge or as a project is better, because you literally have access to different parts of the brain versus thinking of the exact same thing as a problem. And so having that combination of that question and that mindset that this is a challenge, it's a project or a game even, that really helps. And I don't think a day goes by where I don't use it either consciously or it's just so ingrained that it pops up all the time.
Yeah, that's really powerful, and it also shows the power of habit that if you, I think it's Tony Robbins who says that if you ask yourself good questions on a regular basis, then you will also improve the quality of your life eventually, right?
Yeah, and the other part of it would be is that I always just on autopilot think about, well, what could be the advantage in this, or how could I use this or grow from it. So I had this funny experience, that was only a year ago, a really good client and also friend who has done, he's done 3 different one consulting days exclusively and been to seminars, etc. And then he said all of a sudden, hey Mike, I think I just realized what it is that you're doing. Every time I present a problem to you, you find a way of making it into an advantage somehow. And I'm like, yeah, you got it. Because if you can do that, that's literally the most powerful thing you can do. Is that if what you thought was a problem all of a sudden becomes an asset, it's like, wow. everything's changed. It just is. It's like you can't go back now. So yeah, that's what I look for consciously and also unconsciously these days. It's so ingrained. And I'm sure some people now will take advantage of that. Either testing me on it or something, which is fine. We all need new challenges to adjust to.
And interesting, Michael, that you also mentioned seminars, and we have been discussing this a little bit. I think our listeners will be able to actually get that you have been to a ton of seminars and courses. I have too as well, been to a lot of those. And one of the things I really find in these seminars is that people often fail to implement the strategies they kind of get at such events.
Really? No.
Why do you think that's the case? And probably more importantly, how do you cope with this and make sure that people actually take something along from a seminar and actually implement it in their life?
I think it goes back to actually a friend of mine talked to Tony Robbins years and years ago, and he asked Tony something about reading books, and Tony said he didn't read books for the information. He read the books in order to learn something or apply something from them. So what I've done, like for many years now, is before going to a seminar, I'm setting up a specific goal. I have a specific goal in mind, and I do it all the time. Like you saw some of my books. That's not all of them. Is when I read books, I have a project in mind. I have a goal in mind. And typically, it's more like a project, something I'm working on, because that means when I flip through it, or speed read it, photo read it, whatever you want to call it, is that my mind knows what to look for. And so I sort of apply that the same thing to a seminar, is that I have a specific thing I want to work on, specific goal, etc. So that means that when I see something or learn something or experience something that can be used for that, it's much more likely that it's going to stick because I had set the intention. The same thing, like for example, if you have someone or two different people learning to play the piano, if someone have the intention of why they want to do it, they just learn it that much faster. And so I think that's a crucial thing by going to a seminar is that you don't just do it because, it was a good pitch, which is actually not that often these days, not mentioning any names, or that you get, dragged into it or even pushed or pressured or just couldn't say no, etc., etc. But you really know why you're going. And you bring a goal or project to it to work on and to filter everything through, because otherwise it's just, especially if it's something with like multi-speaker event, you're just gonna get overwhelmed so easy, and it's just like, yeah, feels great, and Jesus Christ, what am I doing now? And also, if you're doing that, then pick 3 things to test and implement after, because you're just not going to get around to 10 straight away either. It's sort of like, it would be the same. The only place where something like that can work is in the circus, when you have the guy or girl with the sticks and the plates that they spin. That's the only place where it makes sense to have 10 things going at the same time. It doesn't work with goals even, or like things you learn from seminar. And that's something, I've taken the consequences of. And so that's one of the new things I'm testing this year is doing a seminar is about showing up with one goal, one project in mind, and work all the way through only on that goal and that project. So the idea is that you come in with a certain level of belief, expectations, plan, strategy, clarity, what have you, and you walk away 2 days later with all of that, I just about to say elevated, but it's not associated with elevated. But I mean that, and I'm genuinely excited to see what will happen with that, because as far as I know, no one has tested a format like that before, and that's what excites me, is testing something new.
That's really interesting, I would say, and also, I mean, you touched upon this very interesting topic of, I think a lot of people have what you could refer to as information overload these days, and they have a lot of projects, but have a hard time picking the specific project they should probably be working on. What are your thoughts about actually or what can I say, tricks to actually choose the right project, or which, to kind of just prioritize your projects?
Well, the easy answer is pick one, because the longer you think about which one is going to be, the less likely it is that you're either picking the right one in the first place, or something comes up and then you get an idea for number 5, 6, or 7, and it just gets pushed and pushed and pushed. I mean, it's almost like I'm just thinking of a visual for it, but anyway, that's what happens so often, and I've been there. I'm the master of that. I should have awards for that. That's for sure. So it's really about also realizing the value of doing one thing at a time, and especially earlier on. If at a later point, sure, you can do several things at the same time, especially if you have help or team or become really good. But initially, one of the things I think that really makes a difference when I mention this to people is that if you have 4 different projects you want to do, and the goal is for all of them to be profitable, if you have let's say 12 weeks, and each project will take 3 weeks on average. If you do project A first for 3 weeks, then you have 9 weeks of profitability. Then you finish project 2. And that means once that's done, then you have 6 weeks of profits. That means 15. Then you work on project 3, and then you have 3 weeks left. That means 18 weeks of profitability if you do them one thing at a time, instead of if you're trying to do it simultaneously. And that metaphor / reality really boggles my mind when you think about it like that, because you're missing out on a lot of value if you do too much simultaneously. Of course, it's not always practical to finish one thing like vroom, but have that as the sort of operating intention, if you will. The other metaphor I like to show people, because everybody can sense this, is that if we were going into a fist match and I said to you, okay, you can have the first punch, and you know what? I'm going to allow you to punch with both hands at the same time. Everybody, if they even try to do that, it's like, you're not going to knock over a sick chicken with 2 hands. But me, on the other hand, I'm going to use one hand only. And I'm going to lean back. I'm going to use gravity, forward momentum, and I'm just going to punch the shit out of you. It's really, I love that metaphor, because it's so easy to realize, oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. I mean, another flip side of the seminars, Michael, is also masterminds, and I have been attending one of your masterminds you did with Rasmus Grenegren.
Yeah.
And in general, I know you have been to a lot of masterminds. If you find yourself at one of these masterminds, or if you are hosting one, what's, in your experience, the best strategy for facilitating a really, really valuable mastermind?
The most important thing, and which is also the most difficult thing, is to make sure that everybody there is on the same page in terms of mindset, and in terms of abundance, and in terms of really feeling on the core level that anybody's success in the group is of benefit to the whole group. Is that there's no jealousy, that there's no talking behind people's backs, etc. But everybody is genuinely excited when someone succeeds with something, because they realize that thing can, if not be of direct value to them, maybe it will be to one of the other members of the group. Maybe they will add something to it that then make it applicable for you, etc., etc. And I've both seen that as the number one thing that can be achieved in a true mastermind. It's also one of the things that can make a mastermind group not work. If you have people going in there for with the wrong mindset about it, and so that's also what I'm excited about. That's one of the reasons why me and my family are moving to Cyprus, is that it's kind of a cool place to invite people for masterminds or retreats, and even more so. That's why I felt great about going to the US for masterminds, because I was literally away from home, and especially away from negative influences from people around me. I've been very, very fortunate with an extremely supportive wife, for example, and also with my network in general. But that thing about getting away and being with people who have the right mindset, who truly wants to help you and support you, and it has to be givers too. people need to have that that mindset that everybody can help each other, and you don't necessarily want to sort of be accountable of, okay, so you help me with that, blah, blah, blah. It's just, if it's 12 givers in a group like that, it's going to sort itself out.
What's the best mastermind you ever attended?
There might be one currently, which funnily enough is online, that is set up really well and works really well. Physically, it's obviously that's because it's probably the best mentor in the world. That helps for sure, but the method around it is really fantastic. But I would say it's been John Carlton's, because he's so sharp and he's so no bullshit type of guy. So he has this ability to cut right through it, which is ideal in a mass. For sure, you can meet with people, but it really helps to have a leader, and it also helps to have a leader who can actually, literally help and guide and say, okay, here's what you do. It's awesome that other people in the group are sharp enough to bring something to the table. But at the end of the day, the mastermind that works best is if you have a leader that can sort of sum it up and say, okay, here's my suggestion.
I only have a few short questions left.
Sure.
The first one is a small one. It's what is the best advice you have ever received?
Wow. It would be a toss between just do it and just don't. It's funny. I've never thought about what that piece of advice would be, to be honest. But it literally could be that, just do it. And the thing is that, it's certainly easier now, especially because I know that that no matter what happens when I take an action, I have the power to turn it into something powerful. Because either I get what I want, I can learn from it, or I get to practice keeping my focus where it empowers me and turn the focus on what's next. That's always a good practice. So, I would say that's it. Just do it.
Yeah, that's great. And that leads very, very well into my final question, Michael. What has been a really, really interesting talk about a lot of very, very important issues and topics. But I would like to ask you, if you had the ability to just send one text message to everybody in the entire world, what would that text message be?
Buy my shit. I mean, that's a hell of an advertising platform. That would cost millions and millions of dollars. So that's actually the honest truth. Being on a more philosophical level, perhaps. That's a good question. It would probably be something like enjoy the ride. Because that presupposes that you look at this life as a ride. It's a hell of a ride. There's shortcuts, there's detours, there's comfort zone, there's growth zone. At the end of the day, it can all lead to something good. And that's what excites me, is that we more and more really can control that we don't have to leave it up to chance, being victim of circumstance, but we really have just the world we live in right now, and with some of these things we talked about, what's possible mindset wise, it's unbelievable what's possible these days. And that's also why I got so excited when I started asking that question at the end of the live lesson sessions, is because when you really get to that point where you realize that, not only like the old saying, if it's going to be, it's up to me, but it's actually possible. It will require patience. It will require a lot of speed of implementation, a lot of other things. And at the end of the day, the fact that it's possible to go after what you want and have a really, really high degree of certainty that you're going to get there. That's exciting as well.
It really is exciting. And what a ride it has been, this interview, Michael.
Oh,
it's been great. If people want to get in touch with you, reach out on social media or other platforms, how should they do it? The
Michael Lassen on Facebook and Instagram as well. And then there's thespeedofimplementation.com, and I'm going to start to use michaellassen.live for live streaming and videos as well.
Great, Michael. It's been a complete pleasure to have you here.
Likewise.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
It's time to kick ass and chew bubble gum.
Yes, we would like to have a meet room in the tower.
Hej og velkommen til Bear Talk. Mit navn er Bjørn Vestergaard Barfod, og jeg er din vært.